Hello, in this video I wanted to take a look at Thomas Slaight's paper seal padlock. It's these right here, made by Slaymaker. In this video I was going to go over a quick history of them if you're not familiar with them. We're actually going to get to see some x-ray photos of them thanks to Creative Electron. And at the very end we'll do a quick sort of analysis saying if there's any ways we think people might have been able to get into it. If you're interested in the PDF, or the x-ray photos, I'll post a link to the PDF and the high-resolution photos in the video description, so you can just go check those out if you want. And yeah, but otherwise I'll just go ahead and get into it. I have a couple of these paper seal padlocks here, as well as some stamps and keys, and I'm going to talk about them as we sort of go through. I've made this PDF to help me organize my thoughts and talk through it. Okay. Ooh, excuse me, sorry. So, this was invented by Thomas Slaight of Newark, New Jersey. In 1869, the locking mechanism was designed. The lock itself that's used in these. The patent number is 97127, and he was patenting it as a more economic self-locking padlock. It was a lever lock with minor warding, both on the keyway and internal. No curtain. It's not key retaining. The key can only unlock it. It is dead latching by pressing the shackle down, and only springs are used for each lever. So the only springs in this are the ones pressing on the levers in here. And so this was his main component that he was patenting right here. As being more economical and easier to manufacture. In 1872, and I do not know how to pronounce this, so y'all can go ahead and correct me. Escutcheon. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, so I'll just choose one and go with it. But in 1872, the escutcheon was added for tamper detection, and that's going to be this plate on the front here. 1873, the patent was granted, number 141159, and this was a new method of securing paper seals with an escutcheon, and we see pins were used to secure the paper seal to the face of the lock, and the bolt retaining shackle right here was modified to also retain the escutcheon, and then to open the lock required damaging the seal. And there were other seal locks that existed before he came up with this. So some of the other ones that existed, they had glass ones, lead ones, wax ones, wire ones. One of the advantages of paper was that it was cheaper to manufacture, and that when it got in the lock, it didn't tend to jam them. So I'll just cover a little bit of this real quick. So here you can see the escutcheon on the face of the lock, and I think maybe you can see those 4 pins or cleats around the keyway there that press down in here to hold the paper seal so you couldn't shift it or pull it out there. You would have a paper seal like this that would be placed down on there and then clamped down. You would clamp this down on them to sort of show you the operation of the lock. You can close this. It doesn't lock in place until you press down on the shackle, and now the lock is locked. If we insert the key and we rotate counterclockwise, we see the lock opens. If we try to rotate counterclockwise, the key stops and it doesn't want to move. We can't go counterclockwise to lock it. We can remove the key, open up this plate, and you can see that this cover plate is spring loaded. It's getting a little jammy on this one at this point. And if you look careful, I'm not sure I think it's just a little too dark, but in person with a flashlight, you can see in here, and you can see the levers internal. You can just see the top of the levers right here if you have a bright light and then you're looking at it in person. Yeah, so that's the general operation of it. Yeah. Let me see if I need to cover anything else there. I think that's it. Yeah. So, where was it used? In 1872, Thomas Slaight began selling it to the U.S. Internal Revenue Service. He sold these for $3.50. They were purchasing them because they were cheaper than the ones made by the American Seal Lock Company. They were selling seal locks, glass seal locks, for about $5 a piece. And then they had to spend about $12 a year for the glass seals. And the glass seals would be damaged in the lock, and the glass would get in the lock, and there were complaints that the glass was jamming it and making it hard to use the locks. So it was cheaper and didn't jam them as much. For context, I believe the this $17 a year was about $350 in 2011, according to one of the papers I read. So just for context, about $350 a year to maintain it. In 1903, Slaymaker Lock buys the Slaight Lock Company, and in 1904, they move manufacturing operations to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And so you'll see on these, they are marked Slaymaker, Lancaster, Pennsylvania. If we can get that on the slide there, and right there. This one has T Slaight marked on the front. This one does not. So they were produced for about 80 years for the federal government in numbered sets where the key would match the lock. You can see that there with the numbered sets there. I believe that it was just one key to one lock, and there wasn't duplicates of the locks made. And the idea was that you couldn't take apart the lock and decode the levers and then make additional keys for another lock or something, or reuse a seal or anything like that. So the seals that you see here were produced by the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, and these were highly restricted. Lockpicking Lawyer does a good job describing the restrictions on those, but they would shift them out, I believe, every month with different colors. Yeah, and these were pretty heavily restricted, sort of like money. So from 1872 to 1920, they were used by the Treasury Department. 1920 to 1927, Bureau of Internal Revenue, and you'll see one's marked BIR. 1927 to 1930, Bureau of Prohibition. 1930-1940, Bureau of Industrial Alcohol. You can see that one right here is BIA. And then 1940 to 1953, Bureau of Internal Revenue. So apparently they were used until 1953, and then you can see Internal Revenue on the side here. But the actual last seals, I believe, were produced in 1951. One of the things I think is interesting, too, is I like the, you can look at these two locks and you can see they're in very different condition. This one right here, the Bureau of Industrial Alcohol one, is really beat up. I mean, it looks like somebody really went to town on this thing with a hammer. Everything's a little messed up on it. And I just can't help but wonder, was somebody trying to get themselves some alcohol during Prohibition? I guess that would have been until, I guess, 1933. So I wonder if that's why this lock is so beat up, if somebody really wanted to get in there or not. But I don't know. And there were multiple variations of this. So you can see this one is brass, and this one right here is bronze. The Lockpicking Lawyer has a video where he shows a very cool one with a glass plate on the front that has a slightly different method that also destroys the paper seal. Interestingly, though, that's still under the same patents. So Slaymaker, for some reason, I don't know why they didn't try to get another patent on that glass cover plate. They just use the same as these ones. All right, so that's the history of it. And now we can start to look inside it a little bit. I think this is interesting. We got some... these are locks that, they're not extremely rare, but they are certainly rare. They're not common, and they're not cheap. There's a limited number of them, and they're not something that you want to cut open to look inside. You don't want to damage these locks to be able to see what's going on in them. So I'm very happy that Creative Electron was able to get these cool X-ray photos, and these... Printing it out here doesn't really do it justice, but I'll post the links to the higher resolution photos, and you can look at it closer. So this is a really nice internal view. And so what I'd like to do is just sort of compare our internal view to our two patents. This is the patent for the lock, and this is the patent for the tamper-proof, as Heuermann added. So this is his first patent that he comes up with. We can see that he's got this bolt going into the shackle here to retain it. You can see the springs along the side here, how he's got it. And I'm not sure the best terms for all these here, but you can see the levers here. A little hard to see the gates in this photo. And it's actually, because they're X-raying it, these cover plates, when they're down, you can see there's more metal here, so it's actually covering up more of this section right here. You can see on this sort of bolt where it toggles, you can see that sort of middle pin that I don't believe you can see that in person anywhere. It's this super smoothed out, so you can't, however they added that, you can't tell that from the outside at all where these pins are. So that's another cool factor of the X-ray. You can see the two pins that would be here and here. But yeah, the design doesn't really change much between his original and the tamper-proof as far as the basic function of it. We can see this shape matches this one a little bit more, so he's refined it a little bit. And yeah, it looks like in here he's showing a false gate and his levers, but otherwise it seems to be about the same. Oh wow, 11 minutes. I need to keep going. Sorry. Okay, so in the section here, this is showing with the key inserted like so. You can see how that would match up with this. And this patent drawing, the key actually very closely matches this one as well. So you can see that he already knew exactly how he was making that. Let me see if there's any stuff I should point out that's of a special interest here. No, I think that sort of makes sense right there, right? It's kind of neat that you can see that a scooch-on or that cover plate getting moved right there. Okay, so then we turn the key. Okay, so we rotate it counterclockwise. Lock pops open. You can see that there. So I wish, it's too bad that we can't get a good view of, maybe I need some more light or something. But if you could see inside this, you would actually notice that you can see where this bar falls into these gates. You can actually see that up if you have this in your hand and enough light. So that's kind of neat. Yeah. So yep, there's the key turned. It's lifting up the levers. When it gets all the gates at the right height, it toggles this little bar right here and it just sort of pushes everything up. Yeah, so this is going to pivot on that pin right there. And that bar falls into the gates, and this pushes the bolt up, or the shackle up. Okay, so I like this view a lot because this we can actually see a really good view of the gates inside the lock when we take the key out and we don't have the plate. So this is the lock just sort of sitting just like this. But yeah, we can get a really good view here, and I'm going to try to see if I can get this a little closer. Can I make this any brighter? Sorry, 1 second. No, I think that's it. But what's cool here is right here, you can actually see that notch going into the gate. And what's not shown here is this little back piece, the back side of this component here is actually going to, you can sort of see it here, it's going to the very furthest lever in the back, the 5th lever in the back of the lock. And that, it looks like that, that very back lever, I think, helps toggle this somewhat, so the key doesn't have to do it all by itself. And I think this helps toggle it down both when you're opening it and when you're closing it to reset the lever. So I think that's the purpose of the very rear lever, but we don't see any more detail of that in any of the patent drawings. He basically in his patent, he says, that part is a standard lever lock, so I'm not claiming it, and I'm not really going to go into detail on it. But it is cool that we can see these gates here, I think. And we can see how it all opens up there and sort of pushes that lever up a little bit, just a very clear view there. I don't know if you can notice this, but if we look really close, you can actually see the writing that's been stamped in here. You can see the slate right there from the x-ray where it's a little bit lighter. So I thought that was pretty cool too. Okay. Yeah, and if you want to look at any of this stuff closer, definitely check out the PDF or the photos in the description. So, are there any destructive picking, any attacks possible with this paper seal? So this is just theoretical. I am not going to risk damaging either of my locks, trying to either pick them or do these kinetic attacks I'm describing. You're welcome to do that in your video and send me a link and just show me. But I'm gonna leave these be. These are antiques, and I do want to kind of preserve them. So this is all just theoretical. We'll just talk about it. What are some ways you might be able to open this up? So I'm saying non-destructive picking, any attacks possible with the paper seal. So we're assuming that the paper seal is installed on the lock, and that's what we have to bypass as well. So the seal appears to effectively prevent access for traditional lockpicking. When this is all closed up, they've done a good job of preventing, gaps large enough to really get tools in there. And just the design of it, right here, you can see there's really good coverage there. So they really do have these, 90-degree turns that make getting any sort of shim material in there or any sort of picks. And that's really your only two options, coming in through here or through here. And there's no other openings. This isn't an opening here, if you notice. If you can look at the bottom there, that doesn't give you any entrance to the internals of the lock on this hinge point down here. So that's not an entry point. You've got these holes and this hole, and that's everything you've got. And so this covers them up pretty good. I have a very hard time seeing somebody getting a shim in there that's strong enough to manipulate the levers, but not going to damage the lock itself. At least I think it would be evident, there would be some evidence. And of course, if you go through the keyway, you're going to damage that paper seal. I don't know. I'd be very interested if anyone knows a trick about that, but I don't think there would be one. Okay, so because the levers must be in the correct position for the bolt to retract from the shackle, and there's a fairly heavy spring force on those levers, a simple slam kinetic attack are less likely to work. So some of y'all have seen with like very basic cheap padlocks where they're spring loaded, you can, and sometimes really nice padlocks too, you can slam them down really hard or hit them with a hammer and the bolt just pops open. And I was curious if something like that would work with these. I was wondering if they had cut any corners when they actually manufactured it that would allow that. And so what I see when we start looking at the x-rays is I don't think you could just slam this down necessarily, but we have 5 levers. So it's not just a spring-loaded bolt. For this bolt to retract, these levers do need to be at the correct position. And they are held down with spring-loaded force. So this, I believe, and I've seen people say different things. I've heard people say there's 5 levers. I've heard people say there's 3 levers, and I don't know for sure that didn't change throughout time, that there might be different amounts in different locks. I'm not sure. From what I see looking at these, it appears to me that there's 5 levers. 4 of them are actually locking, and one of them's used to help toggle that component there. So we do see in the patents, we see false gates appear in the patents here, but they don't show up in the x-ray at all, or visually inspecting the lock. Like I was saying, when you look inside the lock, you can see the top of these levers, and I don't see anything that looks like a false gate, which to me says there's nothing that's going to catch this bar here and prevent it from going down. So if you can get it to start to slide down, you may get it to just fall into those gates. And in the x-ray, compared to this, you can see these gates are actually really wide. So they provide a lot of room either for error when you're picking the lock, assuming you're willing to damage the seal, or maybe there's no seal. So it looks like that would be very convenient for picking, or I think there might actually be a lot of tolerance in these keys as far as the bitting goes. So it might be a limited number of, with large gaps like that, the actual number of combinations for the keys may be limited. And the other thing is it also might make a kinetic tack. a little bit easier because we've got such a wide area for that to fall into. So maybe, and I'm saying maybe, I don't know, it's possible that we could put some very light tension on this bolt right here. Maybe hook a spring up to it or just pull on it a little bit. And then use some hard hammer strikes, maybe right about this position right here. Actually, more like this position right here, excuse me. So going up kind of right from the bottom in that way. And the idea is that we're trying to let that kinetic force go through and start to knock those levers up. So if we can maybe tap on the bottom of it right there. This one looks like somebody hit it everywhere. Maybe if you can tap it on the bottom there, and maybe you need to pull on the bolt, maybe you don't, you can actually knock those levers to go up enough that the component here would fall into those gates and then let you open the lock. And because the bolt movement does not affect the seal, if a kinetic attack were successful, so if you were able to pull it off with that hammer and knocking it like that, it wouldn't actually damage the seal. So I think that to me is the biggest potential security risk for it. I don't want to say flaw, but the biggest potential for an issue. I don't know if that's really, you'd have to really try and practice with one to see if that's really possible. But I would say that's the security risk, is that it doesn't damage the seal. There are seal locks that were made later on that where the actual movement to retract the bolt causes components to turn with cleats that actually rip up the seal. So there are other designs out there that force the seal to be damaged if the if the shackle opens. And so those would be more secure. So even if you did have a kinetic or some other bypass available, just by opening it, you still damage the seal. And one of the other things I noticed in the x-rays was it did look like it's possible that one of the springs is actually damaged in this. And I think that if these springs were to be damaged, that might make a kinetic attack more possible. I don't know if this is actually a damaged spring or if they used a slightly different spring for that fifth lever. So I can't really tell. It looks like just one, and I wasn't able to tell looking inside the lock. But I think that those are all the major security risks I could think of. I mean, honestly, I would think that it's more likely somebody would try to either copy a key or possibly damage the internals of the lock. I mean, if you copy the key, you still puncture the seal, but you could certainly try to damage the springs or the bolt here to give you enough leeway that you could open the lock. Those are the other possible routes, but once you start damaging the lock, that's not the lock's fault. The kinetic one is the only one I could think of as possibly not damaging the paper seal at all. Sorry, this video is longer than I intended it to be. So just want to give credit where credit's due. Resources and links. Thank you to Creative Electron. They provided the x-rays of these locks, and I think that that's awesome. I think that gives us an internal view that I haven't seen anywhere else on these kind of locks, which I think is really neat. Antique Seal Padlocks, David J. Heuermann, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I guess he recently passed away, which is a shame. He has a great website, antiquepadlocks.com, with a ton of information on all sorts of antique locks. I've referenced it a lot. Paper Seal Padlock, Slaight Slaymaker by MacGyver 101 at Lockpicking 101. Really great forum post describing the history of these locks with a lot of nice high resolution photos. Thomas Slaight, Paper Seal Padlock Timeline by Andrew Oniszczuk. Also on antiquepadlocks.com. This sort of gives you a little more detail on that history as well. It's short, but some more detail on the history of these locks. Super cool antique BIA style seal padlock by Doug Picks Locks on YouTube. It's a good video of checking one out. Coolest lock you've never heard of, BIR seal lock by the Lockpicking Lawyer. Another good video, and he goes into more detail on the seals as well. And then these are the two patents for it, 97127 and 141519. Okay, thank you all for watching, and hope you enjoyed, and have a good day. Thanks. Bye.